Director mocks new employee. Little did he know it was the disguised owner. William Thomas took a deep breath before entering the mirrored building he'd known since childhood, but now as a complete stranger. The anonymous letters that had landed on his desk the week before still echoed in his mind, detailing the daily abuse and humiliation happening in the company his father had built with so much love. That's when he decided to uncover the truth himself. Dressed in a plain blue shirt and cheap dress pants, he introduced himself as William Jones, a recent graduate looking for his first job opportunity. "You must be the new guy," a rough voice said behind him. William turned and saw a man in a dark suit, hair slicked back with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was Richard Peterson, the executive director he'd only known from reports and formal meetings. "Yes, sir. William Jones," he replied, extending his hand. Richard looked at the outstretched hand with disdain, completely ignoring the gesture. "Listen up, Jones. This isn't a place for slackers. If you can't keep up, you better find another job. People like you usually don't last long here." William felt his blood boil but kept his composure. This was just a taste of what was to come. "Understood, sir. I'm willing to learn and work hard." "We'll see," Richard said with a cruel smirk. "Megan, take this young man to learn his duties and make sure he knows his place here." The receptionist, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes, motioned for William to follow her. As they walked down the hall, she whispered, "I'm sorry about what just happened. Unfortunately, that's normal here. Mr. Peterson treats all new employees like that, and not just the new ones, honestly." "What do you mean?" William asked, feigning surprise. "He has a particular way of running things. No one complains because everyone needs this job." Megan stopped in front of a small room. "This will be your desk. You'll be working in document analysis." William glanced around. The office was modern, with high-quality furniture, but there was something in the air he couldn't quite define. A constant tension, as if everyone was always waiting for something bad to happen. "Megan, can I ask you something?" he said, lowering his voice. "Of course." "How long have you worked here?" "5 years." She hesitated before continuing. "I've seen a lot of good things, and some not so good. But here's a tip. Keep your head down, do your job right, and don't draw unnecessary attention. It's the best way to survive here." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now, back to the story. That first morning, William began to grasp the true extent of the problem. Sitting at his temporary desk, he discreetly observed the office dynamics. Employees hurried by, avoiding prolonged eye contact with their superiors. Conversations were hushed, and whenever Richard appeared, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Around 10 o'clock, he witnessed his first shocking scene. An elderly woman with grey hair, dressed in a cleaning uniform, passed his desk carrying heavy supplies. She seemed to struggle but kept working in silence. "Dorothy, you're slower than usual today," Richard said, appearing out of nowhere. "Is age catching up to you?" The woman, who William later learned was Dorothy Williams, lowered her head and murmured, "I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson. I'll speed up." "You'd better. This isn't a retirement home. If you can't handle the work anymore, maybe it's time to consider other options." William felt his heart tighten as he saw the shame on the woman's face. Dorothy was at least 60 years old, and from what he'd overheard, had worked at the company for decades. How could anyone treat a person like that? After Richard walked away, William discreetly approached Dorothy. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She looked at him in surprise, as if kindness was unfamiliar to her. "I'm fine, son. Thank you for asking." Her hands trembled slightly as she straightened the cleaning supplies. "You're the new young man, aren't you?" "I am. William Jones. Nice to meet you." "Dorothy Williams. I've worked here for 28 years. She sighed. "I've seen a lot of changes around here, son. Not all for the better." William wanted to ask more, but Richard returned to the area, and Dorothy quickly stepped away, resuming her work with hurried movements. During lunch, William decided to stay in the office to observe the environment more closely. Most employees went out to eat, but a few remained at their desks, eating simple sandwiches they'd brought from home. That was when he overheard a conversation that chilled his blood. "Fiona, have you prepared the documents I asked for?" Richard was speaking to his personal assistant, a woman in her 40s, always impeccably dressed. "Yes, Mr. Peterson, but I wanted to confirm, are all these adjustments to the evaluations really necessary?" "Fiona, are you questioning my decisions?" Richard's voice dropped dangerously low. "No, sir. It's just that some of these employees have excellent records and are close to retirement. Wouldn't it be fairer?" "Fair," Richard gave a bitter laugh. "Fiona, you've worked for me for 7 years. You should know that fairness is a luxury an efficient company can't afford. We need fresh blood, people willing to work for less. These older employees cost the company too much." William shrank behind his desk, pretending to focus on paperwork while mentally recording every word. Now he understood the scheme. Richard was manipulating performance reviews to justify firing long-time employees and replacing them with younger workers who would accept lower wages. "I understand, sir," Fiona replied resignedly. "I'll take care of everything as requested." "Good. And Fiona? This stays between us as always." After that conversation, William knew he had to act quickly. But first, he needed to understand the full extent of the problem and identify all the victims of the cruel system Richard had put in place. At the end of his first day, as he packed up his few belongings, he noticed Dorothy passing near his desk. She looked even more worn down than she had that morning. "Dorothy," he called quietly, "everything okay?" She stopped and glanced around, making sure they were alone. "Not really, son. I got called into a meeting tomorrow. An evaluation meeting, they said." Her hands shook as she spoke. "In 28 years with this company, I've never been called into one of these. I'm really scared." William's stomach twisted. This was exactly what he'd heard Richard planning with Fiona. "You've always been a dedicated employee. I'm sure everything will be fine," he said, trying to sound reassuring despite his own worry. "I hope so, son. I really need this job. I have grandchildren to help raise, and my retirement is still far off." She took a deep breath. "But you know how it is, right? When you get older, you start feeling like a burden to everyone else." William watched Dorothy walk away, carrying the weight of nearly 3 decades of dedication to a company that now seemed to see her only as a financial obstacle. In that moment, he knew he couldn't just stand by. He had to find a way to protect the people who had given their lives to the business his family had built. The next morning, William arrived early at the office, determined to learn more about Richard's plans. He positioned himself strategically in a spot where he could observe the meeting room without drawing attention. Around 9 o'clock, he saw Dorothy walking toward the room, her steps hesitant and her expression worried. She was wearing her best uniform and had styled her hair in a special way as if heading to a job interview. 20 minutes later, the door opened and Dorothy stepped out with red, tear-filled eyes. Richard appeared behind her, his face completely indifferent. "Remember, Dorothy, you have until the end of the month to get your affairs in order, and please keep our conversation discreet. We don't want to create a bad atmosphere in the office." William felt anger boiling in his veins. Dorothy walked past him without lifting her head, clearly trying to hide her tears. He waited a few minutes before getting up and discreetly heading to the restroom, where he found the woman sitting on a chair in the hallway, trying to compose herself. "Dorothy, what happened?" he asked, approaching carefully. She looked up, and William saw a mix of sadness and humiliation that broke his heart. "They let me go, son," she said, her voice trembling. "They said my performance no longer meets the company's standards, that I need to make way for people who are more suitable." "But that's unfair. You've worked here for nearly 30 years. "I know, son, but it seems that doesn't matter anymore." She wiped her eyes with a crumpled tissue. "Mr. Peterson was very clear. He said the company is restructuring and needs more efficient people. That my age is affecting my productivity." William knew that was a lie. Dorothy was one of the most dedicated and meticulous employees he had ever observed. But Richard had manipulated her evaluation to justify what was purely a cost-cutting dismissal. "Are you going to challenge this decision?" William asked. Dorothy gave a sad smile. Challenge how, son? I'm just a cleaner. They have all the paperwork, all the proof they need. Who's going to believe my word over theirs? She stood up slowly. Better to accept it and try to find another job before they spread bad things about me. At that moment, William made a decision. He couldn't reveal his identity yet, but he could start working behind the scenes to help the victims of Richard's cruel system. Dorothy, I want to help you. I know some people who might be interested in hiring someone with your experience and dedication. That's very kind of you, son, but I don't want to be a burden to anyone. I'm too old to... You're not too old for anything, William interrupted firmly. Your experience and work ethic are valuable. Leave it to me. I'll find something right for you. Dorothy looked at him with surprise and gratitude. Why would you do this for me? We barely know each other. William thought carefully before answering. Because I believe good people deserve to be treated with dignity, no matter their age. For the rest of the morning, William watched Richard's behavior closely. The director seemed especially pleased with himself, strutting around the office with an air of superiority, even greater than usual. At lunchtime, Richard called an impromptu meeting with some employees from the administrative department. William managed to position himself close enough to overhear the conversation. Team, as you know, our company is always striving for excellence and efficiency, Richard began. That's why we've made some necessary changes. From now on, we'll have zero tolerance for employees who can't keep up with our work pace. William saw the employees' faces pale. Everyone understood the implicit message. This means each of you will be evaluated rigorously. Productivity, punctuality, initiative. Everything will be taken into account. Richard paused dramatically. And I won't accept excuses related to age, family problems, or any other personal matters. Work must always come first. A younger employee, a few months pregnant, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. William noticed Richard's gaze lingering on her a moment too long. Any questions? Richard asked, though his tone made it clear he expected none. Everyone shook their heads silently, and the meeting ended. William decided he needed to investigate Richard's methods more thoroughly. That afternoon, he took advantage of a moment when Fiona stepped away from her desk to glance at some documents left open on her computer screen. What he saw left him even more outraged. Spreadsheets with employees' names, ages, salaries, and comments like close to retirement, high healthcare costs, resistant to change. It was a cold catalogue of human beings reduced to numbers on a balance sheet. Can I help you with something? Fiona's voice behind him made him jump. Oh, sorry, I was just looking for some forms I need to fill out, William replied quickly, stepping away from the desk. Fiona eyed him suspiciously for a few seconds before sitting back down. New employee forms are over at the reception desk. Megan can help you. Thanks, William said, hurrying off, but not before noticing Fiona swiftly closing all the open files on her screen. She was clearly nervous about having left sensitive information exposed. By the end of the day, William was determined to find a way to document Richard's abusive practices. He knew he'd need concrete evidence to confront him when he revealed his true identity. As he packed up, he overheard a conversation between two senior employees. "Did you hear about Dorothy?" one whispered. "Yeah, 28 years with the company and they let her go just like that," the other replied, shaking his head sadly. "Is it our turn now?" "I don't know, man, but I'm sending out my resume. I'm not waiting around for the axe to fall." William realized the climate of fear had intensified. Richard was achieving his goal, creating an environment where everyone felt insecure and, therefore, more submissive to his will. That night at home, William reflected on everything he'd witnessed in just 2 days. The company his father had built with such care was being turned into a place of suffering and humiliation. He knew he had to act quickly, but he also knew a hasty approach might prompt Richard to destroy evidence and further harm the employees. He decided to continue his investigation for a few more days, gathering as much information as possible before revealing his identity. The next morning, William arrived at the office determined to dig deeper. Early on, he noticed movement in Richard's office. Through the slightly open door, he saw Richard meeting with a man he didn't recognize. "Charles, you understand the situation, don't you?" Richard was speaking to a man around 55, dressed in a security uniform. "I do, Mr. Peterson." But I worked as a manager here for 15 years. Always had good performance, never any complaints. Charles, that was in the past. The company's needs have changed. You're lucky we found an alternative position for you. Many others weren't shown that kindness. William watched the humiliation on the man's face and understood exactly what was happening. Charles had been demoted from manager to doorman, likely as part of Richard's scheme to cut costs by targeting experienced employees. I understand, sir. I'm grateful for the opportunity to stay with the company, Charles replied. But William could hear the bitterness in his voice. Great. And Charles? I expect you to understand the importance of maintaining a positive attitude. We don't want old stories causing unnecessary trouble. It was a veiled threat and both knew it. After Charles left the room, William waited a few minutes before approaching the reception area where the man had stopped to get some instructions from Megan. Good morning, William greeted. Charles looked up and William saw a mix of wounded dignity and resignation in his eyes. Good morning. You're the new young man, right? William, correct? That's right. And you are? Charles Miller. I work in security now. He hesitated before continuing. I used to be the finance department manager, but things changed. William noticed Charles spoke carefully, as if weighing every word before saying it. You must know the company well, then. I do. I've worked here for 17 years, seen a lot of good things and, well, others not so much. Charles studied William's face for a few seconds. You remind me of someone you know. I can't place who, but there's something familiar about you. William felt his heart race. Could Charles remember him from his childhood visits to the company? Maybe it's just a feeling, William replied, trying to sound casual. Maybe, Charles agreed, but kept watching him curiously. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, back to the story. Over the following days, William developed a careful routine of observation and information gathering. He discovered Richard had a clear pattern. First, he'd identify employees who cost the company more due to age, experience, or accumulated benefits. Then, he'd create situations to justify firings or demotions. One morning, he witnessed a scene that left him particularly outraged. A pregnant employee, Jessica, around 25 years old, was called in for a talk with Richard. Jessica, how are you feeling? Richard asked with a fake smile. Fine, sir. Thank you for asking. Good, good. I imagine it must be hard to keep up the same work pace at this stage, right? Richard leaned back in his chair. I need you to be honest with me. Do you think you can maintain your productivity over the next few months? William saw Jessica swallow hard. She was being put in an impossible position. I feel perfectly capable of continuing to work, sir. My pregnancy is going well, no health issues. I see. But you know you'll need time off for doctor's visits, then maternity leave. Lots of interruptions. Richard drummed his fingers on the desk. Wouldn't it be more comfortable for you to focus on preparing for motherhood, without work stress? It was subtle but clear pressure. Richard wanted Jessica to resign so the company wouldn't have to cover maternity leave costs. Sir, I really need this job. I'm preparing to be a mother, and that includes securing financial stability for my son. I understand your position, Jessica, but you need to understand the company has its needs too. Maybe you should think about it. Richard stood, signaling the conversation was over. Take some time to reflect, but not too much. Jessica left the room visibly shaken. William watched her head to the restroom, likely to collect herself. A few minutes later, he decided to approach her when she returned to her workstation. Jessica, are you okay? He asked discreetly. She looked at him with teary eyes. Yes, thank you. It's just work stuff, you know. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here, William offered. That's kind of you, but it's better not to get involved, she said, lowering her voice. The walls have ears here, if you know what I mean. William understood perfectly. The climate of fear Richard had created made employees distrust even each other, afraid any conversation could be used against them. That afternoon, William decided he needed to find a way to help Jessica and other employees who were being pressured. But he had to be careful not to raise suspicions about his true identity. During the break, He took advantage of Fiona, stepping away from her desk to try accessing more specific information about Richard's plans. He quickly glimpsed some emails revealing the extent of the problem. One particularly shocking email was addressed to the financial board, suggesting human resources optimizations that included cutting employees over 50 and implementing policies to discourage women of reproductive age from staying. William discreetly took a photo of the screen with his phone, ensuring he had evidence of Richard's discriminatory practices. "What are you doing?" Richard's sharp voice behind him made him jump. William turned quickly, trying to stay calm. "I was looking for the monthly report forms. Megan said they were here, but the forms are at the reception desk, as all new employees should know," Richard replied suspiciously. "Jones, are you sure you understand your place in this company?" "Yes, sir. I apologize for the confusion." Richard studied him for a few seconds before responding. "I hope so, because employees who don't know where they belong usually don't stay with us long." The threat was clear. William knew Richard had begun suspecting something was off. That night, William reviewed all the information he'd gathered. He had enough evidence to expose Richard's abusive practices, but he knew he needed to be strategic about how to use it. He decided the next day he would start implementing a plan to protect the most vulnerable employees while laying the groundwork for his big reveal. The following morning, William arrived early at the office and discreetly sought out Charles, who was starting his shift at the front desk. "Charles, good morning. Could you do me a favor?" William asked. "Of course, William. What do you need?" "I'm trying to understand the company's history better. You've worked here so long. Could you tell me what things were like before?" Charles glanced around, making sure they were alone. "Why the curiosity?" he asked cautiously. "Well, I've noticed some things that worry me. I wanted to know if it's always been this way." Charles studied William's face for a moment before answering. "No, not always. When the company's founder, Mr. Anderson, was still active, this was a very different place. He treated employees like family. He was proud to say some people had worked here for decades because they felt valued." "And what changed?" "Mr. Anderson stepped back due to health issues about 3 years ago. Since then, Richard has taken on more responsibilities and, well, you see the results." Charles sighed. "Mr. Anderson's son, William Thomas, was supposed to take over, but from what I hear, he's still finishing his studies in Europe." William felt a pang of guilt. He had indeed been studying abroad, focused on his academic pursuits, while the family business turned into a place of suffering. "Do you think things could change if the founder's son came back?" William asked. "Honestly, I don't know. He grew up in a different world, you see. Rich, studying overseas. He might not even care about what happens here." Charles shrugged. "Or maybe he's just like his father. Only time will tell." William absorbed Charles's words with a mix of determination and responsibility. He had the chance to prove he was like his father, that he cared about the people who kept the company running. "Charles, can I trust you?" William asked impulsively. "Depends on the matter," Charles replied cautiously. "If I told you I know people who could help employees being treated unfairly here, would you help me connect them?" Charles studied him intently for a few seconds. "You're not just an ordinary employee, are you?" he finally said. William felt his heart race. "Why do you say that?" "A few things. The way you talk, your posture, your interest in helping people you barely know." Charles stepped closer. "And mostly, you remind me of someone. Someone I used to see here as a child, always following his father around the facilities." William knew the moment had come to make a decision. He could keep pretending, or he could trust Charles and gain a valuable ally. "Charles, if I tell you something very important, do you promise to keep it secret until I decide it's time to reveal it?" "Depends on what it is, young man." William took a deep breath. "I'm William Thomas, the founder's son." Charles's eyes widened, clearly shocked. "I knew it," he whispered. "I knew you reminded me of someone. But what are you doing here pretending to be a regular employee?" "I received anonymous letters about abuses in the company. I wanted to see for myself if it was true," William explained quickly. "And unfortunately, it's even worse than I imagined." "Good heavens." Charles shook his head. So you've seen everything Richard has been doing? I have. And now I need your help to protect the employees before I confront him. Charles fell silent for a moment, processing the information. What do you want me to do? He asked finally. First, I need you to help me identify all the employees being harassed or threatened. Second, I want you to help me document everything that's been happening. And third, William hesitated, I want you to help me figure out how to regain the trust of the people who work here. Are you sure you want to get into this? Richard won't give up power easily. I'm sure. This company is my father's legacy, and I won't let it become a place of suffering. Charles smiled for the first time since William had met him. Then count me in, boss. It's about time someone put Richard in his place. From that moment on, William had a crucial ally in his mission. Charles knew all the employees, understood who was being targeted, and could provide detailed information about Richard's abusive practices. Over the following days, William and Charles worked discreetly to map out the full situation. They discovered Richard had built an entire system of intimidation and manipulation, directly affecting at least 20 employees. Dorothy, who had been fired, was just the tip of the iceberg. There were also Mark, a 58-year-old accountant who was being pressured to accept early retirement. Sandra, a 45-year-old HR employee who was being demoted for questioning certain practices. Robert, a 52-year-old laborer who had been transferred to more physically demanding tasks as a way to force him to quit. And Jessica, who was still being pressured to leave her job due to her pregnancy. William knew he needed to act quickly, but he also knew that a hasty revelation could give Richard time to destroy evidence and further harm the employees. He decided he would first discreetly help the most urgent victims, then gather irrefutable evidence against Richard, and finally reveal himself in a dramatic and public way. The first step was helping Dorothy. William used his personal connections to secure a position for her at a partner company with a better salary than what she had originally earned. When Charles handed her the offer, the woman nearly cried with joy. "How is this possible?" she asked. "Let's just say there are still good people in the world, Dorothy. People who value dedication and honesty," Charles replied, following William's instructions. The second step was riskier. William needed to gather documented evidence of Richard's practices. With Charles's help, who had access to areas of the company William couldn't visit without raising suspicion, he managed to photograph incriminating documents and record revealing conversations. One particularly shocking discovery was that Richard had diverted funds meant for the employee's pension to cover his own inflated bonuses. "This is outright theft," Charles said as they reviewed the documents. "With this, you can not only fire him but also sue him." William knew he had enough ammunition to destroy Richard, but he wanted to do it the right way, ensuring all affected employees were properly compensated. Meanwhile, Richard began to suspect something was amiss. The mysterious help some employees were receiving hadn't gone unnoticed, and he started investigating where this assistance was coming from. One morning, William was called into a private meeting with Richard. He knew he was walking a tightrope, but decided it was time to start showing his true colors. "Jones, sit down," Richard said, pointing to a chair across from his desk. "I have some questions for you." "Of course, Mr. Peterson. How can I help you?" "It's curious. Ever since you arrived, some strange things have been happening. Employees who were in delicate situations suddenly find solutions to their problems." Richard studied him intently. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "I'm not sure what you mean, sir," William replied calmly. "Dorothy Williams, for example, an employee dismissed for poor performance, suddenly lands a better job at a competing company. Interesting coincidence, don't you think?" "It must be, sir. Competent people tend to find opportunities." Richard leaned forward, clearly annoyed by the response. "Jones, you seem awfully confident for someone who should be worried about keeping their job, especially considering you're still on probation." William felt it was time to show a bit of his true strength. "Mr. Peterson, I understand your concern, but I believe a healthy work environment benefits everyone. When competent employees thrive, the whole company benefits." "Interesting philosophy for someone who's only been here a week," Richard replied sarcastically. "Where did you learn these theories about people management?" "At home, sir." My father always taught me that true success comes from taking good care of the people who work for you. Your father? And what does he do for a living? William smiled inwardly. It was the perfect opening. He's a businessman, built a company from the ground up and always treated his employees like family. He often says a company is only as good as the people who work there. Richard made a face of disdain. Romantic philosophies don't pay the bills, Jones. In the real world, companies need to be efficient and competitive. We can't afford to be a charity house. With all due respect, sir, treating employees well isn't charity, it's an investment. Satisfied employees are more productive, more loyal, and represent the company better. William was starting to loosen up. Companies that mistreat their employees might see short-term profits, but in the long run, they lose competitiveness. Richard was clearly irritated by William's confident stance. Are you questioning my management, Jones? Not at all, sir. Just sharing a different perspective. Well, your perspective isn't needed here. I run this company as I see fit, and I don't need advice from a presumptuous intern. Richard stood up. I suggest you focus on doing your job right and stop worrying about matters that aren't your concern. Understood, sir, William replied, but his eyes showed he wasn't the least bit intimidated. After that conversation, William knew Richard was starting to see him as a threat. It was time to speed up his plans. That afternoon, he sought out Charles to update him on the situation. He's suspicious, William reported. I think we only have a few days before he tries something against me. What do you want to do? Charles asked. I'll give him one last chance to reveal his true self. Then I'll show who really runs things here. William had devised a risky plan, but he believed it would work. He would provoke Richard until he showed his true colors in front of all the employees, and then he'd reveal himself dramatically. Are you sure about this? Charles questioned. Richard might try to hurt you before you get the chance to expose him. I know, but I need to do this right. I want everyone to see who he really is before they find out who I really am. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The next day, William arrived at the office with renewed determination. He knew he was about to trigger a crisis, but he also knew it was the only way to fully expose Richard's abusive practices. That morning, he watched as Richard continued his routine of intimidation. This time, the victim was Mark, the 58-year-old accountant. Mark, I need to speak with you, Richard called out, loud enough for several employees to hear. William saw Mark walk hesitantly toward Richard's office. 15 minutes later, the man came out visibly shaken. William waited a few minutes before approaching Mark. Everything all right? He asked quietly. Mark glanced around before answering. Not really. I just got an ultimatum. Either I accept early retirement with reduced benefits, or I can expect to be fired for cause in the next few weeks. That's blackmail, William said. Yeah, but what can I do? I have a family to support, and I can't risk leaving here with nothing. William made an impulsive decision. Mark, what if I told you you don't have to accept this? That there are ways to fight back against this kind of abuse? How so? Trust me, don't make any decisions today. Just give me one day, and I'll show you there are alternatives. Mark looked at him with a mix of hope and skepticism. Why would you do that? You barely know me. Because it's the right thing to do. That afternoon, William decided it was time to push the situation. He went to Richard's office. Mr. Peterson, may I speak with you? What is it now, Jones? I wanted to talk about Mark. I noticed he was really shaken after the meeting with you. Richard looked up from the documents he was reviewing. And what does that have to do with you? It's just, well, he's a good employee. It'd be a shame to lose him. Jones, you're overstepping. HR decisions are none of your concern. I understand, sir, but I thought you might not know Mark is 58 and has 3 kids in college. An early retirement would be devastating for him. Richard stood abruptly. How do you know these personal details about Mark's life? We talked during lunch. He's very worried. Jones, it seems you didn't get the message from our last conversation. You're meddling in matters that don't involve you. Richard walked around the desk and stepped closer to William. Maybe it's time to reconsider whether you fit this company's profile. With all due respect, sir, I believe I fit perfectly. The question is whether this company aligns with its own values. What values? Richard asked mockingly. The ones the founder established when he created this company. Respect, dignity, fair treatment for all employees. Richard let out a bitter laugh. The founder? Jones, you know nothing about this company or its founder. He was a dreamer, a romantic who didn't understand modern market realities. William felt his blood boil, but kept his composure. Interesting perspective. And what do you think he'd say about how the company is being run now? Honestly, I don't care. He's out of the picture and I'm in charge now. That's how the real world works. What about his son? Don't you think he should have a say in his family's company's future? Richard's face twisted in disdain. William Thomas? Please. A spoiled rich kid who spent his life studying abroad, coddled by his father, with no idea of hard work. When he comes back from Europe, if he even does, he'll find an efficient, profitable company, thanks to my efforts. Are you sure he'd approve of your methods? Jones, you're seriously starting to irritate me. Why this sudden interest in the founder's family? William decided it was time to raise the stakes. Professional curiosity. I've always liked understanding the history of the companies I work for. Well, your curiosity is becoming inconvenient. Richard returned to his chair. Let me be clear. Stop interfering in matters that don't concern you, or you'll be next in line for a very poor performance review. I understand the threat, sir, but what if I told you I'm not worried about performance reviews? What do you mean? It's just, I've always believed reviews should be based on facts, not manipulations, and I get the impression some evaluations here aren't very objective. Richard turned red with anger. Are you accusing me of manipulating reviews? I'm just noting that competent employees like Dorothy and Mark suddenly have performance issues right when they're nearing major career milestones. Jones, you've crossed every line. You're fired. Why? For questioning unfair practices, for insubordination, undue interference, and slandering company management. William smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. Interesting. What if I told you I have documents proving systematic manipulation of evaluations, embezzlement from the pension fund, and discrimination based on age and gender? Richard paled. You're bluffing. Am I? William took his phone out of his pocket. What if I told you I have recordings of conversations where you admit to falsifying documents to harm employees? How did you? That's impossible. Richard, you underestimated some people. You thought you could treat everyone like cattle, and no one would fight back. Who are you? Richard asked, clearly frightened. William decided it was time for a partial revelation. I'm someone who cares about this company and the people who work here. Someone who won't stand by and watch you destroy what took decades to build? No way. You're just some intern. Am I? William stood and walked to the office window, watching the activity in the company courtyard. Are you sure about that? Richard studied him intently as if trying to solve a puzzle. Who are you? He repeated more urgently this time. I'm the person who'll make sure you answer for everything you've done here. The one who will restore the dignity you stole from these employees. Those are just words. You have no power to do anything against me. William turned and faced him directly. Don't I? We'll see. At that moment, the office door opened and Fiona entered carrying some documents. Mr. Peterson, I need your signature on these. She stopped when she saw the tension in the room. Sorry, I didn't know there was a meeting. Fiona, perfect timing, William said. We were just talking about documents. Maybe you can clarify a few things for Richard. Fiona looked confused between the two men. I don't understand. Fiona, do you have children? William asked. Yes, 2 teenage sons. And would you be comfortable if they knew exactly what kind of orders you've been following here for years? Fiona paled and looked to Richard for guidance. Jones, stop this right now, Richard ordered. Fiona, William continued, ignoring Richard. How long do you think you could sleep soundly knowing you helped ruin the lives of hard-working, honest people like Dorothy, Mark, and so many others? I just follow orders. I need my job. Of course you do. But there are ways to keep your job without hurting others. William stepped closer. What if I told you could keep your job and still have a clear conscience? How? By telling the truth, revealing all the unethical orders you were forced to carry out, helping to right the wrongs that were done. Richard stood abruptly. Fiona, don't listen to this man. He's trying to manipulate you. Manipulate? William laughed. Richard, you're the expert in manipulation. You manipulated documents, evaluations, entire lives. I'm calling security, Richard threatened. Go ahead, call Charles. I'm sure he'll be very interested in hearing our conversation. The mention of Charles made Richard hesitate. He was starting to realize something was very wrong with the situation. Fiona, William said gently, you have a chance to do the right thing, to free yourself from the guilt you've carried for years by taking part in these injustices. Fiona looked at Richard, then at William, clearly conflicted. I don't know what to do. Follow your heart. Think of your sons. What kind of example do you want to set for them? Tears began rolling down Fiona's face. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just needed the job, and he said they were board orders, that it was necessary for the company's good. Fiona, shut your mouth, Richard shouted. You know the price of insubordination here. The price of insubordination, William repeated. Richard, did you hear what you just said? You're threatening an employee for considering telling the truth. That's none of your business, isn't it? William walked over to Richard's desk and leaned on it. What if I told you everything that happens in this company is my business? What are you talking about? William looked at Fiona. Fiona, could you step out for a few minutes? I need to have a private conversation with Richard. Fiona, you stay here. I won't take orders from an intern, Richard protested. Fiona glanced between the two men, clearly confused by the power dynamic unfolding before her. Fiona, William said with a voice that carried natural authority, trust me. Go grab some coffee, and in a few minutes everything will make sense. Something in William's tone made Fiona obey. She left the room, leaving the two men alone. Now we can talk man to man, William said. Talk about what? Who do you think you are? William walked back to the window, watching the activity below. Richard, do you know the history of this company? Of course I do. I've worked here for 8 years. Then you know it was founded in 1987 by Henry Anderson, a man who started with just one truck and a strong work ethic. So what? Do you know how he managed to build all this? William gestured toward the yard. Hard work, luck, who knows? No, he succeeded because he treated people well, because he created an environment where employees felt valued and respected, because he understood a company is only strong when the people working there feel important. Romantic philosophies, Richard muttered. No, Richard. Effective philosophies. This company grew because it had a reputation for being a good place to work, because satisfied employees provided better service, because the company's name stood for quality and reliability. And it still does. Does it? William turned to face him. Richard, in the last 3 years, since you took on more responsibilities, the company has lost 30% of its long-time employees. Customer satisfaction has dropped, labor complaints have risen by 400%, and the company's reputation in the market is in free fall. How do you know these statistics? Because I care about this company, because it means a lot to me. Jones, you're delusional. An intern doesn't have access to that information. William smiled and walked to Richard's desk, picking up a picture frame that was face down. Richard, do you recognize this man? William showed him the photo of Henry Anderson, the company's founder. Of course, that's Mr. Anderson. And this young man beside him? Richard looked more closely at the photo. It was an image of Henry Anderson with a teenager, clearly taken years earlier at some company event. It's his son, I suppose? Look closely, Richard. Look carefully. Richard studied the photo, then looked at William. Slowly, realization dawned in his eyes. No, that's impossible. It's very possible, Richard, and it's true. You can't be... William Thomas Anderson, son of this company's founder, and formerly your boss. Richard slumped into his chair, clearly in shock. This can't be. William Thomas is studying in Europe. Was. I returned last week after receiving anonymous letters about what was happening here. Letters that described exactly the kind of behavior I've witnessed firsthand these past few days. No, this can't be happening. It is happening, Richard. And now you're going to explain to me, as the owner of this company, why you've turned the place my father built with so much love into an environment of fear and humiliation. Richard tried to compose himself, but it was clear he was panicking. William, Mr. Anderson, I can explain. Everything I did was for the good of the company, to increase efficiency, reduce costs. Reduce costs. William opened a folder he had brought with him. Richard, over the last 2 years, you've increased your own salary by 180%. You created bonuses for yourself that add up to more than the annual salary of 10 employees, and all while firing people who dedicated decades of their lives to this company. I deserve those bonuses. I'm responsible for the company's growth. Growth? William showed some charts. Richard, the company is growing in spite of you, not because of you. The contracts we have are the result of the work my father built over decades. You're simply reaping what he sowed. That's not true, isn't it? Then explain to me why we lost 3 major clients last year. All of them cited issues with service quality and changes in the company's atmosphere. Richard was visibly sweating now. William, Mr. Anderson, maybe I was a little too strict. But it was necessary. The competition is fierce. We need to stay competitive. Competitive? Richard, competitiveness comes from quality, innovation, excellent service, not from exploiting and humiliating employees. I can change. I can adjust my approach. William studied him for a moment before responding. Richard, you don't get it, do you? This isn't about adjusting approaches. It's about character. It's about who you are as a person. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you spent years tearing apart the lives of honest, hard-working people. I'm talking about you stealing from the pension fund to finance your own luxuries. I'm talking about you creating such a toxic environment that employees are afraid to come to work. I can return the money. I can make things right. Can you? William leaned over the desk. Richard, how will you make up for the humiliation Dorothy felt when she was fired after 28 years of dedication? How will you undo the stress you caused Jessica, a pregnant woman who should have been focused on the joy of expecting a child? How will you restore the dignity you took from Mark, from Charles, from so many others? Richard couldn't answer. Do you know what the worst part is, Richard? William continued. It's that you did all of this cynically. You knew you were destroying lives and you didn't care. Because to you, these people were just numbers on a spreadsheet. I'm sorry. I truly am. Are you? Or are you just afraid of the consequences? Richard lowered his head, unable to respond. William walked to the window again, watching the employees working in the courtyard. Richard, my father taught me that leading a company is like being responsible for a big family. You take care of the people, and they take care of the business. You create an environment where everyone can thrive, and everyone thrives together. Your father was a dreamer. Was he? William turned sharply. Richard, my father built this company from nothing and turned it into one of the most respected in the industry. He did it by treating people with dignity. You, in 3 years, nearly destroyed everything he spent decades building. I was trying to modernize. Modernize, Richard? There's nothing modern about treating people like trash. That's primitive. It's regressive. It's everything society should fight against. William returned to the desk and sat in the chair across from Richard. Now you'll listen carefully. You're fired, obviously. But this is just the beginning. William, please. You will return every penny you took from the pension fund. You will sign documents taking responsibility for the discriminatory practices you implemented. And you will participate in a transition process where every employee you harmed will be properly compensated. What if I refuse? William smiled coldly. Richard, do you really want to find out what happens if you refuse? Do you want me to hand over all the evidence I've gathered to the proper authorities? Do you want me to make public what you've done here? Richard understood he had no choice. What do you want me to do? First, you'll come with me to the company auditorium. We're gathering all the employees. What for? So you can publicly apologize for everything you've done, so you can take responsibility for your actions, and so I can officially introduce myself as the new CEO of this company. William, this will humiliate me publicly. Will it? William stood up. Richard, you publicly humiliated people like Dorothy, Mark, Charles, and so many others. Do you think you deserve better treatment than what you gave them? Richard knew he had completely lost control of the situation. Fine, I'll do what you're asking. You're not being asked, Richard. I'm telling you what's going to happen. William walked to the office door and opened it. Fiona, he called. The secretary appeared quickly, clearly anxious to understand what was happening. Fiona, please gather all employees for an emergency meeting in the auditorium in 15 minutes. Everyone, no exceptions. Everyone, Fiona asked, confused. Everyone. And Fiona? William smiled at her. You don't have to worry about those unethical orders you used to receive anymore. From now on, things will be very different around here. Fiona looked at him with a mix of confusion and hope. 15 minutes, auditorium, William repeated. After Fiona left, William turned back to Richard. Are you ready to face the consequences of your actions? Richard nodded, defeated. One last thing, Richard. When we're down there, you will speak the truth, the whole truth. Because if you try to downplay or twist what you've done, I'll be there to correct every lie. 15 minutes later, the company auditorium was packed. Employees from every department crowded in, clearly confused about the reason for the emergency meeting. William scanned the faces in the auditorium and saw exactly what he expected. Anxiety, fear, uncertainty. Charles was in the front row, and when his eyes met William's, he gave a small, encouraging smile. William stepped onto the stage, accompanied by Richard, who was visibly nervous. Good afternoon, everyone, William began. I know this meeting is unexpected, but there are some very important matters that need to be addressed. The auditorium fell completely silent. First, I'd like to properly introduce myself. My name is William Thomas Anderson, and I am the son of Henry Anderson, the founder of this company. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Several employees exchanged glances, clearly shocked. I know many of you don't know me, or only knew me as a child visiting the company with my father. I've spent the last few years studying abroad, preparing to one day take on the responsibilities my father built. William paused, letting the information sink in. Last week, I received anonymous letters reporting serious problems in this company's management. Problems that included discrimination, abuse of power, document manipulation, and mistreatment of employees. The murmurs grew louder. To verify the truth of these claims, I decided to go undercover in the company as a regular employee. For a week, I worked among you as William Jones, a new intern. Now there were open exclamations of surprise throughout the auditorium. What I discovered deeply shocked me. The allegations in the letters were not only true, but even worse than I had imagined. William looked directly at Richard. Richard Peterson, who held the position of executive director during my absence, implemented a management system based on intimidation, discrimination, and abuse of power. The room was now completely silent, everyone waiting to hear what would come next. Competent and dedicated employees were fired or demoted simply because their age and experience represented higher costs. Performance reviews were manipulated to justify decisions that were purely financial. Pregnant women were pressured to resign. Employees nearing retirement were humiliated and forced to accept degrading conditions. William could see tears in the eyes of some employees. Richard diverted funds from your pension fund to finance his own bonuses. He created an environment of fear where no one felt safe to question unfair decisions. He turned this company, which my father built on respect and dignity, into a place of suffering. Now anger mixed with sorrow on the faces of the employees. But today, this ends, William said firmly. Richard is fired, effective immediately. He will return every cent he misused, and all the injustices committed over the past years will be rectified. The room erupted in applause, but William raised his hand, asking for silence. Before we continue, Richard has something to say to you. All eyes turned to Richard, who was pale and sweating profusely. Richard began in a shaky voice, I want to apologize to all of you. The room fell completely silent. I know my actions over the past years have caused suffering and injustice. I know many of you were harmed by the decisions I made. Richard paused, clearly struggling to continue. I have no excuses for what I did. There is no justification for treating hard-working, dedicated people with disrespect and cruelty. William observed the faces in the room. There was pain, anger, but also a kind of relief in seeing Richard finally taking responsibility. I manipulated performance reviews to justify layoffs that were based solely on financial considerations. I pressured competent employees to accept demeaning conditions. I created an environment of fear and intimidation. Richard now had tears in his eyes. And I diverted resources that belonged to you for my own benefit. The silence in the room was deafening. I know my words cannot undo the harm I've caused. I know many of you lost sleep, felt humiliated, questioned your own worth because of my actions. Richard looked directly at Dorothy, who was present at the meeting at William's invitation. To you, Dorothy, who dedicated 28 years of your life to this company and were treated with disrespect and ingratitude, I ask for forgiveness. You deserved honor and recognition, not humiliation. Dorothy was crying, but they were tears of relief and vindication. To Mark, Charles, Jessica, and all the others who were targets of my unfair decisions, I take full responsibility. You are valuable and capable people, and the problem was never with you. The problem was always with me. Richard turned to William. William Thomas, I turned the company your father built with love into a place of suffering. I dishonored his legacy and betrayed the trust placed in me. No apology I could offer would be enough to repair the harm I've caused. William waited a few seconds before responding. Richard, your words are a first step, but words alone cannot undo the damage. You will fulfill all the commitments you made to me privately, return the embezzled money, participate in the process of rectifying injustices, and cooperate with any necessary investigations. I understand and accept all the conditions. William turned to the audience. Now, let me speak about the future. This company will return to what my father always dreamed it would be, a place where people are valued, respected, and treated with dignity. The applause began again, this time more heartfelt. All employees who were unfairly dismissed or demoted in recent years will be invited to return if they wish, with conditions appropriate to their tenure and competence. Dorothy was smiling through her tears. Discriminatory practices will be completely eliminated. We will implement clear promotion policies based on real merit, not considerations of age, gender, or personal status. William paused and looked directly at Jessica. Pregnant employees will receive all necessary support, including proper leave and job security. Motherhood is a blessing, not a problem to be solved. Jessica was crying with joy. The pension fund will be fully restored and regularly audited by independent entities. Every stolen cent will be returned with interest. We will implement an open communication system where any employee can bring concerns or suggestions directly to management without fear of retaliation. William walked across the stage, making eye contact with several employees. But more important than all of this, we will restore something lost in recent years: mutual respect. This company has always been a family, and families take care of each other. Charles stood and began to applaud. Gradually, the entire audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. When the applause finally subsided, William continued. I know trust isn't rebuilt overnight. I know some of you are still afraid, still feel uncertain. It's understandable after years of mistreatment. But I promise you, as long as I lead this company, every employee will be treated with the dignity they deserve. Mistakes will be corrected through dialogue and training, not humiliation. Problems will be resolved with transparency and fairness. William looked at Richard one last time. Richard will be escorted out of the premises after signing the necessary documents. His time at this company ends today, but the process of repairing the harm he caused will continue. Richard nodded and left the stage, escorted by Charles, under the silent gaze of all the employees. Now, William said, his voice growing warmer, let's work together to make this company a place where everyone can feel proud to work. a place that honors the memory of the man who founded it and reflects the values that should always have been preserved. The final ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. After the meeting, William spent the rest of the day speaking individually with employees, listening to their stories, understanding the full extent of the damage caused by Richard, and planning corrective measures. Dorothy was one of the first people he sought out. "Dorothy, I want you to know you have a place in this company for as long as you wish to stay. And not just as a cleaning staff, if that's not what you want." "What do you mean, son? You have 28 years of experience here. You know this company better than anyone. I'd like to offer you a position as General Facilities Supervisor, with a salary matching your experience and responsibilities." Dorothy couldn't believe what she was hearing. "But I'm just a cleaner." "You are a dedicated and experienced employee who was undervalued by someone who couldn't recognize quality when they saw it. That will never happen again." Then William spoke with Mark. "Mark, I know you were pressured into accepting early retirement. I'd like to invite you to stay and take on the position of Chief Financial Officer, with a salary that matches the role and full autonomy to implement the ethical practices you've always championed." "William," I don't know what to say. After so many years of being overlooked. "Mark, you weren't sidelined because of incompetence. You were targeted because you had integrity. These are the qualities this company needs in its leadership." The conversation with Charles was particularly emotional. "Charles, you helped me tremendously these past few days, even without knowing who I was. That speaks volumes about the kind of person and employee you are." "I just tried to do the right thing." "Exactly. And that's why I'd like to offer you your old manager position back, along with an additional role as Director of Human Resources. We need someone who truly understands the value of people." "William, are you sure?" "After everything that happened, I'm certain. This company needs leaders who've experienced the consequences of unfair practices firsthand. You'll help ensure it never happens again." Finally, William spoke with Jessica. "Jessica, I want you to know your pregnancy is a reason to celebrate, not worry. You'll have all the stability and support you need." "Thank you, William. I was so scared. I didn't know how I'd support my son if I lost my job." "You won't lose your job. And when you return from maternity leave, if you'd like, I'd like to offer you a promotion to supervisor in your department. You showed courage and integrity, standing up to the pressure you faced." In the following weeks, William worked tirelessly to implement all the promised changes. Mr. Peterson fulfilled his obligations to return the embezzled funds and cooperate with the transition, clearly remorseful for the path he'd chosen. The transformation in the company was swift and dramatic. The climate of fear gave way to an environment of collaboration and mutual respect. Employees who had been unjustly fired returned, many in better positions than before. Dorothy, now General Supervisor, became one of the most respected employees in the company. Her experience and dedication were valued by all. Mark implemented transparent and ethical financial systems that became a model for others in the industry. Charles built a human resources department that prioritized employee well-being and development, ensuring discriminatory practices could never take root again. Jessica gave birth to a healthy boy and returned to work as a supervisor, helping create a more inclusive environment for other women. 6 months after William's dramatic revelation, the company had not only restored its reputation, but had become a benchmark for ethical practices and humane management. Clients who had left returned, new contracts were signed, and the company experienced sustainable growth built on quality and trust. William, now officially the company's CEO, kept his office door always open. He held monthly meetings where any employee could voice suggestions or concerns. Transparency and open communication became hallmarks of the new leadership. Henry Anderson, the founder, who had stepped back due to health issues, recovered enough to visit the company regularly. His joy in seeing his son restore the company to what he'd always dreamed it could be was evident to everyone. "You've done more than I ever expected, my son," said Henry during one of his visits. "Not only did you fix the problems, but you made the company grow in ways I never thought possible. I learned from you, Dad, and I also learned that leadership isn't just about making the right decisions. It's about understanding that every decision affects real lives. The story of the company's transformation spread throughout the business sector, and William was invited to speak about ethical management and humanized leadership. But he always made sure to mention that the real credit belonged to the employees who had the courage to report injustices and who stayed true to the right values even under pressure. Richard, meanwhile, faced the legal consequences of his actions, but also began a process of personal reflection. In a letter sent to William months later, he wrote, "I understand now that true power doesn't come from intimidating people, but from empowering them. Thank you for showing me that, even in the hardest way possible." The company continued to grow, not just in size, but in its positive impact on the community. Internship programs for underprivileged youth, partnerships with technical schools, and environmental sustainability initiatives were implemented, always with the active participation of employees. Dorothy, whom many thought would just be a victim of the story, became one of the most respected voices in the company, often consulted on important changes due to her experience and wisdom. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story of transformation and justice. Do you believe William made the right decisions by infiltrating the company? What lessons can we take away about leadership and dignity in the workplace? Share your honest opinion in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like if the story touched your heart. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories about overcoming challenges and justice.